If I were to ask you to write a list ranking crimes by severity, I'd be surprised if murder wasn't near the top spot. So, is it ever right for someone who has admitted to killing a person to walk away from court scot-free? Well, that's exactly what happened in today's case as we tell the story of Yvonne Chevallier, a wife wronged by her unfaithful husband who, in a fit of passion, took the ultimate revenge. A promising medical intern at a hospital in Orléans, or if you prefer, Orleans, France, Pierre Chevallier was well liked by his colleagues and teachers, nearly all of whom agreed that his future would be bright. In 1935, he met a woman named Yvonne Rousseau, who worked as a midwife at the same hospital. Despite their mutual attraction, their relationship seemed doomed from the start. Pierre came from a wealthy and influential family, whom their local community held in high regard, whereas Yvonne had grown up on a peasant farm on the outskirts of France. However, the young lovers fought against societal norms and were wed in 1939. Their first son, Matthew, was born the following year, but by then, the world as they knew it had already drastically changed. The German invasion of France in May 1940 drove Pierre to join the French resistance, a line of work that tore him away from his wife and son. Keeping his distance from his family was heartbreaking, but Pierre forced himself to do so in order to keep them safe. Thanks to his high intelligence and affable nature, it didn't take long before he had made a name for himself in the underground, rising through the ranks to become one of its leaders. After the war, the role that he played in liberating the country from Germany earned him a French Legion of Honor Medal and a Croix de Guerre, or War Cross, both of which are amongst the highest military decorations in France. His reputation also won him an election as he was appointed Mayor of Orléans sometime in 1945. That same year, Yvonne gave birth to their second son, whom they christened Turgal. Pierre may have been trained as a physician, but he took to politics with great enthusiasm, often leaving his family in Orléans to spend time in Paris, where he rubbed elbows with fellow politicians. This may have boosted his career, but it also took a toll on his marriage with Yvonne. During his time with the resistance, Pierre had lost the fiery passion that he once had for his wife, and the post-war years exacerbated this. Handsome, sociable and popular with everyone, he began to regard Yvonne as dull, unintelligent and unable to hold her own in the social circles he was now a part of. His indifference to her slowly grew into contempt, and at one point Pierre even told Yvonne that she disgusted him. Yvonne, on the other hand, continued to harbour her strong feelings for Pierre. In a bid to recapture her husband's love, she began to devour books on art, literature and politics so that she too could hold interesting conversations with other people. She also began wearing more flattering clothes and even frequented beauty salons to make herself more presentable. Despite her best efforts, Pierre remained indifferent. In desperation, Yvonne turned to alcohol and drugs, seeking in them the comfort and acceptance that her husband was unwilling to provide. It wasn't long before she became totally dependent on an amphetamine called Maxiton and a barbiturate known as Veronal. In early 1951, Pierre's political career was on the rise, and there were even rumours that he would be appointed as a junior cabinet minister, a prestigious position made even more impressive by the fact that he was just 42 years old. His wife was far from excited about it though, especially since she had just received an anonymous letter stating that her husband had a mistress. This letter shocked Yvonne to the core, and she instantly set out to find proof for the letter's claims. It didn't take her long, as while searching through one of Pierre's suits, she came across a love letter stashed away in one of the pockets. The note was signed Jeannette and read, quote, "Without you, life would have no beauty. or meaning for me. The writer may not have included her last name, but Yvonne knew in her heart that it must be their neighbour, Jeannette Perreau, whose husband, Leon, owned a successful department store in Orléans. More than a decade younger than Pierre, Jeannette was beautiful and sophisticated. Two things Pierre had convinced Yvonne she was not. She was also known for having a string of lovers, which she was able to hide from her husband, who was too busy running his business to pay attention to her activities. Armed with evidence of Pierre's affair, Yvonne left her children in the care of a maid and took a train to Paris, intending to confront him. However, she never made it inside the National Assembly where he worked, due to an usher who had been ordered not to let her enter under any circumstances. He also told her that her husband had refused to speak with her, which deepened the humiliation she felt. Undeterred, Yvonne returned to Orléans and confronted Jeannette Perreau instead. A fierce shouting match between the two women ensued, but this didn't resolve the situation. Feeling defeated, Yvonne returned home to wait for her husband's return. Yvonne's hopes of discussing Pierre's affair were dashed when he refused to talk about it with her, claiming that it was a private matter that didn't concern her. He continued treating her with contempt, which drove her to attempt suicide in a bid to force his feelings. However, this failed to work. Desperate and enraged, Yvonne applied for a firearms license and purchased a pistol, a semi-automatic handgun, and several bullets. She told people this was because she needed to protect herself and her children, since they were at risk due to Pierre's political career. Nobody knew that it was actually Pierre who needed protection from her. As Yvonne spiraled deeper into despair, her husband's reputation as one of France's most promising politicians grew. On August 11th, 1951, he was given his first cabinet job, a position as the Secretary of State for Technical Training, Youth and Sports. Thanks to this appointment, Pierre seemed well on his way to becoming a political behemoth. As gratifying as the investiture ceremony was, many spectators noted that it was marred by Pierre frequently being called to the telephone. Later, it was revealed that his wife had been calling him the entire day, furious and demanding that he come home immediately. Pierre's colleagues at the National Assembly had been told that Yvonne was temperamental and rather high-strung, so her repeated phone calls to him didn't surprise them at all. They also understood his predicament and weren't concerned when he decided to head home to Orléans after the ceremony ended. Upon arriving home, Pierre immediately started arguing with his wife, berating her for disturbing the most important event in his political career. Yvonne, on the other hand, desperately begged him to end his affair with Jeanne, to which he refused. His desire to continue seeing his mistress drove Yvonne wild. She ran into their bedroom, retrieved one of her guns, and shouted that she would kill herself. Pierre, who had grown accustomed to her threats of suicide, goaded her into doing so, believing that she didn't have the strength to actually pull the trigger. He couldn't have been more wrong. Only, rather than shoot herself, Yvonne fired 4 shots at Pierre, hitting him in the chest, forearm, thigh, and chin. He collapsed to the ground with the noise alerting their eldest son, Matthew, who burst into the room. Yvonne calmly led him away, leaving him with one of the maids before returning to Pierre's body and firing one last shot into his back. Afterwards, she telephoned the police telling them, quote, "Would you mind coming over at once? My husband wants to speak to you." At the time, Pierre was still the mayor of Orléans, so the authorities didn't question it when they were called to his home. Nothing could have prepared them for the bloody and horrific sight that awaited them inside, nor could they have imagined that the killer would be brazen enough to admit to the crime. When the police arrived, Yvonne immediately gave herself up, announcing to them, "I have just killed my husband." Yvonne was arrested immediately and charged with murder. The following day, she asked for a female defense lawyer, claiming Only a woman could understand me. The trial the following year was sensational, with Yvonne subjected to a barrage of questions from Judge Raymond Jardin, who started the proceedings by recounting her peasant origins and the luxurious lifestyle she had been enjoying thanks to her husband's rising political career. The authorities noted that Yvonne seemed more remorseful during her trial, even admitting that she had planned to kill herself after shooting Pierre, but opted not to do so after thinking about the fate of their sons. Yvonne also claimed that Pierre's murder was nothing but a crime of passionnel, or a crime of passion. This argument implied that it was only her husband's infidelity and refusal to end the affair that drove her to shoot him. Many spectators sympathised with Yvonne. The support only grew when Jeannette Perreau, who was made to take the witness stand, shamelessly testified, quote, "I have a husband who is a good companion. I intend to stay with him. Pierre Chevallier loved me. I loved him. For love, one is never punished." The prosecution did their best to depict Yvonne as a jealous wife who selfishly sacrificed a promising politician, one who could have done a lot of good for France and its citizens. But their efforts were in vain. By then, the court's sympathies already lay with Yvonne, perceiving her as a good woman betrayed and mistreated by the husband she loved. After a 40-minute deliberation, the jury found Yvonne not guilty of killing her husband, Pierre Chevallier. According to an article published on November 17, 1952, in Time magazine, outside the courtroom, thousands of bright-eyed housewives stood waiting in a drizzle of rain. When the verdict was announced, they broke into an ear-splitting cheer. "Bravo, Yvonne, bravo!" The drenching rain trickled down their husbands' coat collars, and the husbands of France shivered. Besides the acquittal, Yvonne Chevallier was also granted absolution by the Catholic Church. Unable to deal with the media frenzy in the months that followed her trial, she left France and migrated to Guinea, where she began volunteering at impoverished communities, working as a nurse in a hospital for the poor. Perhaps she saw this as her own form of penance. She is believed to have spent the rest of her life there, passing away sometime in the 1970s. So, what do you think of the case of Yvonne Chevallier? Do you think she should have been imprisoned for the murder, or was the court right to let her go? Head down to the comments section to let us know your thoughts. Right then, until the next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.